Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you on the subject of Buddhism and agriculture. I think the committee came to me because they knew I was from Fresno, California, born here, and they thought I knew something about agriculture. I really don't know a whole lot about agriculture because I never liked it. I hated the vegetables that we grew, like carrots, onions, zucchinis, cucumbers, and to pick them was back-breaking, and I hated it. And so I wasn't too smart about being a farmer either. You know, people on the farm start off very early. They pick when it's cool. I'm dumb. I go there at 10 when it gets hot and start picking. And all I do is complain all day, picking. And it's my fault because I didn't go out at 5. But I was playing most of the nights, going here and there and having a good time. But anyway, the reason I wanted to talk about Buddhism, the land, and the Issei struggle is because most of us do not know the struggles that the Isseis really went through and the difficulties that they had with all the laws, all the things that were thrown at them. And so I just want to talk a little bit about some of the things that they went through so that you get an idea of what your past generations have really done for you. Because I think we really overlook this kind of thing. We like to say, we had a 100-year anniversary celebration. And we say, thank you to the pioneers for their contributions. But no one knows what the contributions were. So then we think, well, we had the service, we've done our part, so now let's go eat. And so you have a grand banquet. But the sad part of it is, no one talks about the hardships of the pioneers who came to this country at a very early age, had to struggle as laborers, faced the frustrations of being poor, not knowing the language. How do you get around? But they had to manage. And think of it, would you like to go to a foreign country and start off with nothing? Think about that. You would not. You want to start off where you're at right now. And you don't want to think about all that stuff because it's crazy. Who would do something stupid as that? But the Isseis did that, and they did it for a good reason. Most of the Isseis that came in the early, I guess they started coming about 1880s, right about that time, 1880s, they started to come. They came about 1,000 a year or so, and they came. And they had great dreams, great dreams. They wanted to come to make a fortune because they thought America was a land of opportunity. You can make a lot of money, and then you go home rich. You can stand tall in your community because you helped your relatives to better their lives because you had the money and the courage to go to America, make it, and come back and support them. The unfortunate part of it was, that's all it was, a dream that never materialized. A lot of them that came, they came from Buddhist families, Jodo Shinshu families, a lot of them. And I will give you statistics about where they came from later. But I want to talk to you about just the early Isseis that came. They came pretty young. They had no future because they come from depressed areas of Japan, farming Japan. No future in Japan because they were second and third sons or fourth sons. What are you going to do? The first son gets everything. Even though it's a poor farm, he gets it, the first son. But if you're the second or third, maybe the second, they may keep you, just in case the first son dies or something, they may keep you. But the third, fourth, fifth, it's out of the question. And as they get older, they eat more, right? And so the family's saying, gee, you should go out and find your own way in life. And so they didn't know what to do. And somehow they heard about going to America and making it rich, becoming rich. And so they decided to come. And their parents said, no, you don't have to go to America. You got to make it in Japan. You can go someplace, find some property, work on it, do something, but don't go to America because that's a foreign country. You don't want to go there. But said, no, but I could make money. You know how young people are. They don't listen to parents. They don't listen to parents. The parents are telling them, look, you're going to suffer. You don't know what it means to suffer. They're suffering, but you don't need to know the real meaning of suffering. You really don't. So don't go. But they keep you insisting because they have this glowing picture of the future, the great future that they're going to have. And so they insist on them going, and so the last day, probably, this I heard from one family, but I think it's common with most of the young men that came. The parents brought them to the Butsudan and said to them, maybe I'm making this part up, because I kind of feel that this is what happened. See, I don't know for sure, but I bet this is what happened. Because if it weren't for something like this happening, I don't think the Buddhist churches of America would have started. But anyway, the parents said, come to the Butsudan. We'll have a short service, Omairi before you leave. And so they put their hands together and recited the Nembutsu Namandav, 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 Namandav. And the son, said, what is this all about? He doesn't understand Jodo Shinshu or anything. All he's thinking about is going to America. That's all is in his mind. But then the parents kept reminding him, whenever you feel down, whenever you feel low, and you're totally hopeless, you feel this hopelessness deep inside of you, just put your hands together and say, Namandav, Namandav. And we will be there with you in Nembutsu. I'm sure parents said that to them. Because, in those days, people were very religious, in ancient communities. They had these deep feelings for the Nembutsu gratitude, despite the difficulties that they were having, even as farmers in Japan. So they told him to do this. And so the young man comes to this country, full of hope. And he gets off the boat thinking he's going to hit it rich, but as soon as he steps out the boat, he knows it's not going to be easy. There's no way it's going to be easy. Everybody's talking English. They don't know what that means. They don't know what they're talking about. They're giving him a bad time. He doesn't know. So then, where do I go? Where can I stay? Where can I eat? He doesn't know. But he has to find a way, and he struggles, he begs, he does all kinds of things to try to find a way into the community that he stepped into. The only things that he could do is find other Japanese that maybe came earlier than him, or a group somewhere so that he could communicate with them, have some kind of community, as small as it may be. But if you couldn't find that, he had to find any kind of job. And probably, in all probability, a lot of them worked for the railroads. For menial pay, menial sustenance, and the most dangerous jobs, like dynamiting the mountainsides. Dynamiting the mountainside. So I'm sure, strewn along the railroad, there's many Asians, unknown grave sites. And no one knows who they are, strewn across. And if they should survive it, then they had made something. And so in that time, if he goes through all this and survives it, he's thinking, gee, I'm getting older. I've been here 10 years now. I'm 30 years old, going on 40, I don't know. He says, gee, I want to start a family. So he starts communicating with Japan. And that started the well-known picture bride thing. Picture bride thing. Everybody thinks picture bride is a romantic thing, right? It wasn't romantic. I've heard horrendous stories from East Bay ladies. You know, it wasn't romantic. You know, one day, this lady, you know, she told me, she got this picture. And he was a handsome guy in the picture, really handsome, about 25 or 26, you know, nice looking. You know, he's from America, so he must be doing really well. So she gets all excited and decides to go to America to marry him. And then the parents do the same thing as they did to the boys. You know, you're going to America. You don't know what it's like. You know, you're spoiled here. You don't know what it's like. But she said, I'm going anyway because he looks so good. He's so handsome and he's young. And so all the fanfare, you know, she gets sent off and she comes to America. And she gets off the boat and she looks at the picture, looks around for this handsome guy and can't find him. Can't find him. She told me this, I couldn't find him. And then suddenly, you know, people start to disappear and here's this man standing there, looks to be 60, maybe he's, I don't know. You know, 40 can look 60, you know, if you suffered a lot. So maybe he looks 60, but he maybe has been 40. But anyway, he approaches her and says, are you so-and-so? And she said, yes, I am. And says, then I have come to pick you up because you are to be my wife. And she was upset because she came to this country based on a big lie. And so she decided, I am not going to marry you. I am not going to be with you. So don't think I'm going to go with you wherever you want me to go. But she could have said, she said all those things, but didn't do a thing. For the simple reason, she had nowhere to go. No place to go. Can you imagine how that felt? Can you imagine that? Nowhere to go. And she couldn't go home. Because she came with such great feelings of success and this handsome guy that she expected to see, and she saw this man. But she had no choice. She had no choice. She had nowhere to go. She didn't know anyone. She couldn't speak the language. She couldn't do anything but follow him. But she was so angry at the devastation of the lie that this marriage was built upon that she said she is never going to be a good wife. Never. But as time goes on, you know, and he takes her to the house. What house? It's a ramshackle, whatever it is. Maybe one bedroom, maybe two. No running, you know, pump. No bathroom. Well, they didn't have bathroom in Japan either, but anyway, she's thinking, gee, it's like it's a shack. It's not a home. It's not a home. She thought he would have a home. But no, it was just a shack. No electricity, no running water. And if you needed to do anything, you had to go out. If there was an outhouse, you're lucky. If not, you do it out in the fields. And that's what they started out. That's how they started out. Food was sparse. Food was sparse. But this man, there's one thing that was good about him. He did come to a point of total devastation, just feeling that it was hopeless. There's no meaning for his life. No one cared because no one seemed to care around him. And so he contemplated even suicide. That's how depressed he was. But somewhere in the back of his mind, he remembered his parents saying. It sounded like he didn't, at that time he wasn't paying much attention because he was thinking of other things. But then, for some reason, it stuck in his mind. And that was, if you ever feel depressed, lonely, sad, and you think you are totally alone, put your hands together and just say, Namandav, Namandav, Namandav. And we will be with you in the Namandavs. And for that instant, he somehow, from the devastation that he felt for himself and all the pains that he was going through, because of that Namandavas, he was able to kind of shift. And he felt this love, this kind of compassion coming to him from across the ocean. And instead of feeling sorry for himself because of that shift, he was able to determine what he had to do. And what he started out doing was to find land and work the land. What he found was not anything great. For most of these men, when they first started out, they worked all over the place, but most of them were migrant workers. They came to where the harvest was. And in Central California, the harvest, the grape industry started very early, about 1840 something. And so when they came, they had to find somebody who had connections with the Central California area. And they came to harvest the grapes. But what about after the harvest? Then they had to find someplace else to go. And that's what they did. There were nomads. In this vast America, there were nomads. Until he found this land. Somehow he negotiated with the people who had the lands, whatever. He negotiated. And he had comrades. And they negotiated. Can we borrow your land so that we can farm it? And they said, okay, but you're going to have to, if you make it a success, they thought they're going to fail anyway and go away, but the tenacity of these people, because he found this kind of opening through the Nembutsu to work the land. He started working the land with meager equipment. The first thing that he had to get was a horse. And horses were not so hard to come by. You can get an old horse and, buy an old horse cheap. And so that's what he did. And worked and started to plow the fields, clear it out. Because, these landowners, they like the clean land. They didn't like the outlying junky land. So they didn't like it, so they parceled out those small parcels to these Japanese people from from Japan, and parceled out small pieces of land in terrible areas. But they worked the land. They really worked the land. It's hard to say how many Issei first group, how many died. In this valley alone, I'm sure there are cemeteries with unknown grave sites, or so you have a nice, haka for the unknown people that have passed on, who came very early, and they passed on either through illness, whatever. Because working in Central California is really tough in the summertime. It was hot. No air conditioning, no nothing. You worked. And none of them died in the illnesses that prevailed at that time. They died. And so there are a lot of hakas with no names on it. And so I think maybe Fresno, they have a monument here somewhere. I think it's on the west side, a big monument for those who have passed on with no names, no dates. The unknowns that have passed on. But because of the way these people worked, the Issei's worked, the floodgates began to happen in about 1888. Because as they began to work the harvests, the grape industry here in Central California, they made contacts with or worked through their bosses, and they had friends here in the area, and so they made contact, and they were able to get these kinds of lands, and they began to work it. But they couldn't own it, because in 1813 there was a land law that says no immigrants can own land, especially Asians. Yeah. But despite that, they worked it. And so this lady saw her husband so dedicated to trying to make a living. And so she saw that. And she saw that he always, in the evening, for whatever reason, he would look to the setting sun and put his hands together and say, Namamidabasa. And she was gradually brought into that kind of feeling. And so the families grew. The families grew. And the thing about it is, from these small farms, these small farms, they started to work it, and they made a great success. And they, like Reverend Marvin said, they fed the people, and they fed themselves. But as much as they fed the people, in terms of money, they didn't get much. They didn't get much. So they didn't have the equipment in the beginning. But in a census from 1889 to 1903, a total 84,562 Japanese immigrants were counted. 53,427, or 63%, came from 4 major areas, prefectures in Japan: Hiroshima, Yamaguchi, Kumamoto, and Fukuoka. In 1930 census showed that 2/3 of 138,843 Japanese residents in the United States had come from prefectures where Jodo Shinshu was dominant. 5? Was it 5? Huh? Oh, okay. 5 minutes? That's it? Okay. So, and then all the other land laws came in. And then because of such big population growth and the success these people were having, they stopped the 1824, the Immigration Act, and no more can come in. But that's when the Issei's really started to build, and they started families. Some got children to buy, children because they were citizens got to buy own land. Some did. Some others still had the difficulty of having to deal with that kind of thing because they didn't understand the laws. But probably these people worked with a sponsor that was really kind and helped them to get the land. And so they were able to start off with there was a group of people that got about 40 acres that started out at this time. So the Iseis endured all kinds of things, all kinds of things. You can't imagine what they were. But when the kids came, they felt that this Nembutsu that helped them to the most difficult time in their lives, that connected them to the teachings of Shinna and to their parents in Japan, that gave them the kind of space to work with the issues, to be responsible for the issues and circumstances that they were in, and do the best they could. You can't say that they succeeded much. You couldn't say that. But they were succeeding. They were doing pretty well until 1941. And the war began. And many of them lost everything. Some were lucky because they had good friends who took care of the farms. Most were not. And so when they came out of camp, what did they do? They became seasonal migrant workers all over again. And they worked it and worked it and worked it until they could find enough funds to buy property. And they served, and they were all members of the temples that you all belong to, up and down the West Coast, you know, the temples. There are, on the walls of the temples, whether you all know it or not, the blood and the tears and the struggles and the difficulties, the discrimination that exists, all written on all the walls. But the one thing that they wanted to leave for the children and grandchildren was the image of the Nembutsu, the statue of Amida, so that when they have difficulties in their lives, they too will have this kind of power to internally look within themselves, to be free of themselves for just that instant, so that they can too see what they need to do to make their lives successful. We cannot say that the Issei pioneers were successful in their lifetime, but we have to say that they were really successful for leaving this teaching for each and every one of us. But we have what we have based on the struggles and the frustration, the tears and the sweat and all the discrimination thrown at them, and yet they persisted because they had the Nembutsu to work with in their lives. And that's your legacy. So whenever you have a banquet from now on, and you say, thank you to the pioneers, I hope that this kind of talk will help you to realize that you are the recipients of this kind of pain and suffering. But people, the Issei people, never lost to that pain and that suffering because they had the Nembutsu and because they had an inner spirit that helped them to see what they needed to do next. They worked the land, and each of you should do the same, because the Nembutsu is truly a powerful thing in your life if you let it be. Don't ignore this teaching, because if you do, you will miss out on the great gift that your pioneers left you. Thank you. Did I make it?